welcome to the January 16th meeting of the Freedom Hub Working Group. Appreciate you coming here today. We've got a really exciting guest today, and we're excited about that. We've been having a lot of interesting meetings in the past for those that haven't been here last year, and we've got quite a nice little list of people for the rest of this year, and so this is a little great auspicious beginning here with John. And I was going to say, I'm going to let Charles do a little bit of an intro and kind of set things up a little bit, and then we'll get right into it so we maximize our time with John Goodman today.
Thanks, Jeff. And Charlie Froman here. I work with Jeff in our little health disruptor and also this weekly Freedom Hub Working Group webinar with decision makers and influencers from across the country. I first met John Goodman in the early 1990s when I was a young Republican health staffer trying to figure out what this Hillary Care thing was. And Heritage was pushing us to individualize insurance, and then along comes John Goodman and then Pat Rooney at Golden Rule saying, that's kind of good, but don't forget to self-insure for low-level expenses with medical savings accounts, which is what HSAs were called back then. And John became pretty much a hero for the free market part of the health reform movement, and he still is. And go 10 years forward, and we got HSAs passed in a Medicare law, and then they were slightly crippled by Obamacare with a high deductible requirement. Despite that, they still are growing. People like them, they use them. Financial planners now are touting them as retirement vehicles. And John in Forbes just wrote about health matching accounts. So a new savings vehicle, which isn't your own money, but it is a unique new way to cover out of pocket. And we're even seeing HSAs with sharing organizations. John is with the Independent Institute now. He also is very influential on taxes with his friend Lawrence Kotlikoff, very influential with the Republicans and some Democrats and think tankers across the country. So we're excited to hear his take on what's next with Trump and the Democrat Congress and the healthcare market at large. And before I turn it over, Jeff, real quick, next week we have Byron Schlomack on the big issue of privatizing licensing and how that can start up a lot of businesses. Then Judge Jim Gray on legal reform, Perry McDonald to return us to a bit of education freedom, Roman Buehler, these are all the following Wednesdays on the Regulation Freedom Amendment, Joel Salatin on local farm food freedom, Jacob Hornberger on radical liberty, Chris Fryman on the failure of philosophers, Jeff Tucker, a rather face of liberty, and then finally in April, we have Baron Shoka on tech freedom. So we got a full lineup all through April. So Jeff, with that, I'll turn it over to John Goodman.
Fantastic. John, the floor is yours today.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. You should also mention that we have a relatively new organization called the Goodman Institute for Public Policy Research, and you can find us just under that name. And most of what I do is done through the Goodman Institute, although I do a lot of things with the Independent Institute. I thought today I might talk a little bit about something that has almost been completely ignored, not only by the mainstream media, but also by the healthcare media. And that is things that Donald Trump, the administration, is doing to radically reform not only Obamacare, but the entire healthcare system. Through executive order, the Trump administration is doing things that I thought were previously impossible without congressional approval. I worked with Pete Sessions, who was chairman of the Rules Committee, and Bill Cassidy, who is the senator who's probably most knowledgeable about health care in the Senate, to produce the Sessions-Cassidy Health Reform Bill. And you can see that bill summarized at the Goodman Institute website. There are 12 bold ideas, of the 12, most of which had never been introduced in any bill before. But of those 12 bold ideas, the Trump administration is trying to wholly or partially implement 5 of them. The most dramatic is making health insurance provided by employers personal and portable. Now, to understand how radical this is, you need to know that under Obama, if an employer bought for an employee individually owned insurance with pre-tax dollars, the potential fine was $100 per day per employee. So that's $36,500 per year per employee. The highest fine in all of Obamacare for buying for the employee insurance that he can take with him to the next job and in and out of the labor market. So Trump has completely reversed that, allowing employers to use the health reimbursement arrangement accounts. And through those accounts, employers can now buy for their employees individually owned insurance. It has to be Obamacare compliant, but as long as it complies with other Obamacare regulations, individuals can own their own insurance. That is a very, very radical step, and I, along with others, was surprised that this could be done by the executive branch. Now, the second thing they have done is move in the direction of tax fairness. One of the most bizarre things about our healthcare system is that if you're middle or upper income family, you get a very generous tax subsidy if you get insurance at work. You get almost no subsidy at all if you buy your own. For lower income people, the unfairness is largely reversed. If you're buying insurance on your own in exchange, you get a very generous subsidy through the tax credits available through the Obamacare exchanges. But at work, when your employer buys insurance with pre-tax dollars, low-income people don't pay income taxes. So the only advantage there is the avoidance of the 15.3% FICA payroll tax. So for low-income individuals, the subsidy is much higher in the individual market than the group market. So what Obama has done in allowing employers to buy individual insurance with employer dollars pre-tax is he's made a huge step in the direction of tax fairness, because what it means is that now middle upper income people can choose between group insurance and individual insurance on a level playing field. They're going to get the same tax advantage no matter which choice they make. And similarly for low income individuals, they're not going to be able to double dip, but they can take advantage of the higher subsidy in the individual market if they choose to do that. So those are two of the most radical things that have been done. Then the health reimbursement arrangement is, of course, a flexible savings account, and I have argued for many years that the health savings account is too rigid. That it requires an across-the-board deductible, regardless of the appropriateness of the deductible, and if you don't have that, then you can't have a health savings account. Well, the health reimbursement arrangement has no such rigidity connected to it. It's a very flexible account. It can wrap around just about any third-party health insurance. Then the Obama administration did something else that's unusual. If what happens at a lot of fast food restaurants is the employer will offer Obamacare compatible insurance, but it will be the minimum offer the employer has to make. So what that means is that the employee has to pay a premium equal to 9.5% of wages. The deductible typically will be $6,000 or $7,000, and does not cover the family. If the employee wants to cover the family, he has to pay 100% of the premium out of his own pocket with no tax subsidy. So typical workers for McDonald's or Burger King who are living paycheck to paycheck find this, and young healthy adults find this insurance very unattractive, and 95% of them will turn it down. So what the Trump administration is now saying, well, if this family turns down that offer, the employer can still put in an account up to $1,700 in a special HRA account, and the family can use that $1,700 to buy insurance that is not compliant. I'm sorry, it's $1,800. So that is a huge step in the right direction. They can have what I call limited benefit insurance, and and that's insurance that does not meet Obamacare regulations, but still gives the family some protection. And then finally, the Trump administration has made a major change in the regulations governing short-term insurance. Short-term insurance has been around a long time. Traditionally, it was insurance that people would buy to bridge the gap between college and a job, or between jobs, or between times when they would get group insurance somewhere else. It used to be that under Obamacare that you could have a short-term plan that lasted up to a year, and this was normal. But Obama reduced the period to 2 months. So what Trump has done is he's extended the period that you have the insurance up to 3 years. So you can buy short-term insurance, and it can be guaranteed renewable up to 3 years before it expires. But then they've also done something else that we called for in the Sessions-Cassidy bill, and that's what I call health status insurance. So you buy a plan that, and all these plans, by the way, are not compliant with Obamacare regulations. So they can be just about anything the insurance company wants to offer, subject to, however, to state regulations. So the insurance company can offer the kind of insurance that they offered prior to Obamacare. And then you buy that insurance, and it's guaranteed renewable up for 3 years. Then with health status insurance, which you can think of as a separate insurance plan, but you can buy it from the same insurer, what this does is guarantee that you can go into another 3-year period without any penalty for a change in health condition. So by stringing together these two types of insurance, the short-term insurance that lasts up to 3 years, the health status insurance, which bridges the gap from 3-year period to 3-year period, we could literally recreate in the individual market the kind of insurance market that we had before there ever was Obamacare. So this is kind of exciting. It opens up all kinds of possibilities at the state level, and it's very, very radical. Now, I want to draw your attention also to a new publication that the Trump administration has put out. It's called Reforming America's Healthcare System Through Choice and Competition. You can find it online. It's a 124-page document. And what it does is it lays out the Trump administration's view of healthcare and health reform. And what makes it so radical and bold and different is that this is the first time any administration has ever said that the main source of problems in healthcare is not coming from the private sector, it's coming from government. In other words, our major problems in healthcare are the result of government failure, not private market failure. And this goes on for 124 pages, almost exclusively focused on all the ways in which government makes healthcare more expensive, makes health insurance unable to meet family needs. And it's a really very interesting document. And I summarized some parts of it in another Forbes editorial. One thing, however, I got wrong. I met with Seema Verma and her folks this morning. She's the person who is in charge of Medicare and Medicaid. And in my article, I said the reason you can't talk to your doctor by phone or by email or by Skype is because of unwise government policy. And I said, beginning with Medicare, that Medicare basically pays doctors the same way it paid them in the last century, before there was email, before there were even cell phones, and it hasn't changed. And the way Medicare pays is typically the way private insurance pays, employers pay. And then state governments pile on by making consultation by phone or by email or by Skype illegal in some cases. So what I learned this morning, though, is two things. One is that by congressional legislation, Medicare could not. Well, I knew that. I knew before today that Medicare allowed telemedicine connecting hospitals with rural areas, but did not do it for urban areas where most people live. what I learned this morning was that Congress, by legislation, prohibited telemedicine in urban areas. And so you could only link a hospital with somebody out in a rural area, not with people who live nearby. So what they now have done beginning this year is they're not calling it telemedicine, they're calling it virtual medicine. So Seema Verna has, in one fell swoop, liberated telemedical technology, and nobody knows this. I didn't know it. Maybe some of you knew it, but this is a huge change. She's circumventing clearly congressional intent, but no one has so far objected. There are no lawsuits trying to stop her. So this is a truly radical change. The Bush folks never would have done this. So this is really a different kind of Republican administration. Well, that's my brief overview. I may have said more than you wanted me to say, and I think we ought to open it up.
Okay, John. Well, that was great, and you're right. That was an awful lot of information, but boy, there was a lot of great nuggets in there. I believe everybody is unmuted, so I would say anyone that would like to kick things off. Or Charles, unless you have a first question in mind. I'm unmuting everybody here as we go.
Jeff, Charlie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
The question I would have is, John, back to HSAs and HMAs. What is your latest thinking on the future of health savings accounts, or even that new vehicle, health matching accounts? As Jeff and I get into the business, we're finding that HMAs are so new, hardly anyone knows about them.
Well, years ago, I drew a diagram for Bill Archer, who was chairman of Ways and Means Committee, and there was a triangle, and at the base of the triangle there were many small medical bills, and then there was a gap, and then there was the catastrophic insurance, and there was a high deductible. And Bill Archer liked that diagram so much he codified it, and so basically you couldn't have a health savings account. He called them at that time medical savings accounts. You couldn't have one unless your insurance plan looked like that. And then when Obamacare came along, they modified the restrictions a bit so you could cover preventive care. But beyond that, the high deductible had to be across the board. So that restricts the ability of the health savings account to be combined with chronic illness and be combined in a way that makes the account flexible and adaptable to different medical needs. So then the health reimbursement arrangement comes along, and it is completely flexible, but the individual doesn't get to keep the funds. You can't take them with you. So you limit the financial incentives of the employee. So what I've always thought we need is the opportunity to have a very flexible account that wraps around any third-party plan, and individuals should be able to take the money with them if they don't spend it on health care. And I also think there should be after-tax deposits and after-tax withdrawals, but that's something we probably don't want to get into today.
That was very good. Okay, everyone definitely is unmuted, so if there's anyone that has a good question, the floor is yours.
I'll go. Hey, John, this is Wiley Long with HSA for America. I was wondering about the health status insurance, and are you aware of any insurance carriers that are actually putting together this kind of coverage yet?
Well, this is all very brand new, and so I'm not aware. And in the past, when insurance companies have been asked about it, they didn't seem to have a strong interest in doing it. But now that we see what can be done, that we can create a very large market, and that most of the people in the individual market who aren't getting subsidies could have the opportunity to have insurance like they had before there was Obamacare, I would think there would be renewed interest. In Texas, what we're thinking about doing is requiring the short-term insurance to look very much like a standard Blue Cross plan looked back in the old days. And if it doesn't look like that, you can't sell it. But it's going to be guaranteed renewable, and you'll have the health status insurance so that it will go on for as long as you want it. So the insurance plan, if it wanted to offer this plan to people in the individual market, it would have to offer both kinds of insurance. So that's my goal for Texas. Texas is a big market.
Yeah. Okay.
A good one to set the tone on what others should do. So that's an excellent target space. That was nice, Wiley. Thank you. And another question?
Yeah, I'm Kishore Jetnandani, and I have a few questions about HRA. Do they apply to large enterprises as well, or are they restricted to small and medium scale? And also, would they allow the use of DPC, the fees paid to subscription fees paid to DPCs to be charged against that?
Well, any employer can have a health reimbursement arrangement. Now, under the 21st Century Cures Act, which was passed about a year ago, Congress allowed small businesses, and these are firms with fewer than 50 employees, to use the HRA to buy individual insurance. So what I'm now saying that Trump is doing for all employers, small employers have been able to do for a year. The problem there is that the rules have been so complicated and burdensome that very few employers have been doing it. So it's the goal of the Trump administration, though, to make that process a lot easier and more user friendly. So I expect that to open up new possibilities. I don't know about the fees. I'm really not on top of that.
Okay.
And John, did I understand you to say that they can spend a limited amount? I think you said $1,800 for non-Obamacare approved reimbursement.
This is a very important distinction. Right now, the employer has to connect his HRA with an Obama-approved insurance plan, which means that any employer who wants to offer an HRA for any purpose has to either offer the employer-mandated Obamacare insurance or use the account to buy Obamacare regulated insurance in the individual market. So for the most part, HRAs are going to be tied to Obamacare insurance. But the law, the new regs also allow that if employees have been offered an employer plan that meets Obamacare regulations and all the essential benefits and so forth, and they turn that down, then they can have $1,800 in the account to buy non-Obamacare regulated insurance that does not meet Obamacare standards. And that could be what I'm calling limited benefit insurance. For example, it might be insurance that pays the first $25,000 of medical bills, which back before there was Obamacare, what most workers wanted at fast food restaurants and most healthy, young, low-paid workers wanted that kind of limited benefit insurance. They wanted insurance that paid first dollar, but didn't cover them for catastrophic costs.
Be interesting to see what starts to come out of all of those changes. The engine of entrepreneurship sounds like it's opening up further still. It's pretty exciting.
Jeff?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Charlie here, just a reminder that if you look at the people who have raised their hands on that symbol, that's an easy way for folks to get attention from you. Also, John, my question also dealt with HMAs, health matching accounts, about which you wrote in Forbes, where $2 of after-tax contributions or $1 of after-tax contributions could double your money. So $5,000 over 3 years, I think you wrote, could bring $10,000 in basically a supplemental insurance account for high deductible plans. Have you thought any more about HMAs and how they could allow for higher deductible insurance?
Well, again, thank you for reminding me that I wrote about that at Forbes, and that's a special product, and it is legal and can be combined with any high deductible plan. And the way it works is you have a high deductible. Let's say it's $5,000. It allows you a way of saving for the $5,000. Of course, one way to save is just start putting money into an account until you get to $5,000. But this group down in Houston offers an insurance plan that gets more attractive as time goes on. And basically, after 3 years, you can have $5,000 of insurance, first dollar coverage, for only $2,500 of contribution. So I thought that was kind of an attractive idea for some people, for families that tend to live paycheck to paycheck. I thought that was an attractive way to save for the deductible.
Very good. Any other questions here today? This has been very good. Nice little diverse range of questions we're getting. While we're waiting for someone else on a question, what do you think is going to be realistic on some of the things that the HSA may actually expand to allow you to pay for? What looks like the low-hanging fruit that we might get to become law, as it were?
Well, the great disappointment for me, since you brought it up, is that none of this works for the concierge doctors. And as it turns out, one of the most popular, fastest growing products in the market right now is concierge care. And there's a model that I like. It started in Wichita, Kansas. It's called Atlas MD. You can find it online. And it's low-cost concierge care. For a middle-aged adult, it costs, I think it's $50 per month, $50 per month per person. So, and for that, you get 24/7 telephone, email, everything that is provided by a typical primary care physician. So the disappointment, going back to Trump now, is that none of the things I described before there was Trump, you could not use an HSA to pay your concierge doctor. And now, even with the Trump regulatory changes, you still can't use your HSA money that way, nor can you use the HRA money, including the $1,800 HRA account. So I would say, when you think about what can you do or not do with these accounts, the big disappointment for me is that they're not able to go into concierge medicine, which is very attractive. A lot of employers are doing it, but they're not doing it through HRA accounts.
Why? And I know there's been a push to allow that to be the case. What's kind of the institutional bias against doing that? Why is that one thing that seems so like, why not kind of a situation has so much resistance?
Well, you have sort of the crossroads of two regulatory problems. One is the law said that you can't use HSA accounts to pay premiums and for insurance, and at the same time, though, most concierge doctors have succeeded in convincing state regulatory agencies that they're not insurance plans. So it seems to me that the Trump administration, as radical as it's been everywhere else, could have been sort of radical here, but in any event, they chose not to. So we're going to need an act of Congress to liberate concierge medicine, or what they like to call now direct pay medicine.
Mm-hmm. That's going to be a challenge in this current Congress, I would imagine. What do you think is going to happen with the current Congress, with the flipping to the Democrats at this point? Is this going to unravel some of these things, or this stuff's going to just soldier on anyway?
Well, one of my disappointments with Republicans, both on health care and on taxes, is they made no real attempt to do anything in a bipartisan way. So Paul Ryan announced early on that tax reform would be done through reconciliation, which means we don't need Democrats. And of course, everything they did on health care was also done through reconciliation, which meant we don't need Democrats, and they never tried. I thought that was a mistake. The Democrats made a mistake in passing Obamacare without any Republican involvement, and they lost a lot of seats because of it. So now going forward, we can continue with this partisanship, or maybe somebody will say, hey, maybe there's something that both parties can gain from. Last year, I got Pete Sessions and and some people from the Freedom Caucus, maybe a couple of dozen or so Republicans in the House, to endorse a resolution. The resolution said that in any reform of Obamacare, states will be given broad authority to do whatever they want to do, provided things get better for people with health conditions. Better means lower premiums, lower deductibles, and wider networks. So you have Democrats all over the country that ran on the pre-existing condition issue, and they spent $90 million on ads. They spent more money on more ads on healthcare than any other issue. Pre-existing conditions was the issue. So here they are, and they have no idea what to do about it. I told Pete, look, what we're doing to people who are sick is unacceptable. The status quo shouldn't be acceptable to Republicans or to Democrats. People who are sick are being excluded from seeing the best doctors, going to the best hospitals. So there's no way to fix all that from Washington. So it seems to me that this is an opportunity for Republicans and Democrats to come together, and Republicans to say, look, we want to give broad freedom to the states to do, and I have a long list of things I want states to do, but they don't get to do any of it unless they have a credible plan that will improve health insurance for people with medical conditions. Somebody's not muting his phone.
I'm trying to find who that was there, and I didn't see where. I think here it is. Okay.
You might want to mute everyone, Jeff.
I figured it out. Go ahead. We're good. Everybody else has been good. We just had a little aberration there. Yeah, that was good, John. You know, it's going to be interesting to see if someone will be that champion. So, but it's such a simplistic fix. It's sad to see that this is how Washington functions. And you've been living in the belly of it for such a long time.
Well, now the idea is simplistic because I want it to be simplistic. But when the state begins to reform Obamacare, it can get quite complicated. And I'll just tell you some of the things I think ought to be done. We ought to have a real market where plans can specialize. So plans can, like Cancer Treatment Centers of America, ought to be able to specialize in cancer care. It ought to be able to say, if you don't have cancer, you can't be in our plan. And medical records ought to travel with the enrollee. And plans should be able to ask health questions and determine what the medical condition is for the people who enroll in their plan. And then for people who are sick, there ought to be a market for sick people. And we need subsidy money for the high cost enrollees. But then plans should be able to bid on treatment for those folks. So there are a lot of things we could do to use market forces to solve problems that would require change in the Obamacare law. And it seems to me that if things get better for sick people, Democrats ought to like all of that.
One would hope.
Jeff, Charlie here. John, two questions. A lot of big employer brokers that Jeff and I talked to dismiss HSAs as part of the solution for a lot of the frontline workers in these big group plans. And then I wanted you to talk a little bit more about what states could do to apply for waivers. You met with Seema Varma, and I know some states are trying to think of how they could use their Medicaid or expanded Medicaid or individual markets to get more flexibility even without a block grant law passed. So those two questions: how do you combat the continued skepticism of HSAs with some group agents or experts, and then do you see any possibility with flexibility in the states?
Well, I don't know why employers are reluctant to take advantage of HSAs. It's simply a way of making the employee a partner and keeping costs down. And why you wouldn't want to take advantage of that, I don't know. But more and more are doing that. And the evidence is quite strong that it really does control costs. Now on the waivers, the most important waivers so far have involved, the initials Tunstall. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. It's good to keep this in mind. Because what these waivers are doing so far is they're allowing state governments to put more money into the individual market, but doing it in a way that creates a risk pool or risk insurance or invisible risk insurance. Doesn't really matter what you call it. It's just an extra source of funds to pay for the cost of sick people. And then, of course, if you do that, then you can lower the premiums or stabilize the premiums for healthy people. So that's the reform that we've seen so far. And ironically, you have Paul Krugman in the New York Times saying this is the way to go. And you have the Heritage Foundation saying this is the way to go. So this is deja vu all over again. We have people who think managed competition works, think, if you just put more money into it, it will work. So, but those reforms involve none of the things I mentioned a minute ago. They just really involve segregating out sick people, providing additional money to subsidize them. And that's, by the way, what the insurance industry wants. They want more money and to cover high cost enrollees. And they're not asking for any other reforms. Now, beyond that, what could be done with a waiver? What I think is the most interesting possibility is to carve out some of the mandated benefits, some of the essential health benefits from Obamacare regulations and treat them publicly. For example, substance abuse. I mean, I don't see why a state couldn't say, we don't think substance abuse ought to be handled through private insurance. We can make it a mandated offering, but we don't think private insurers are any good at it, and we don't see any reason to cover it that way. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set up a public system alongside private systems. AA doesn't cost anything. And last time I looked, AA works as good or better than really expensive treatments paid for by private insurance. So you have private options for people. They can pay out of pocket. If they can't pay, if they don't have the resources to do that and money is needed, you can have public treatment systems. So now we've taken a very expensive benefit and we've said, if you want to pay for it privately, that's fine. If you can't afford it, we're going to have some public assistance. No reason to burden private insurance with that very expensive mandate. It seems to me that premature babies and really costly newborns could be handled in a similar way. And so by carving out some and handling them in a different way, it seems to me like we could bring the cost of individual insurance way down. I'm not telling you that, remember, whatever you do, I say you, whatever state does has to be approved by HHS. And Seema Verma didn't tell me this morning she's going to approve all of that. But I think that kind of thinking ought to be tried.
John, Taylor Davidson with Neil Benton Insurance. I just wanted to speak to the resistance on the group plans on the HSAs. I know when I was more active in the market, I never had had success with the group plans, but I had massive success with the individuals on the HSAs. And mostly where I found and this is going to come back around to a question for you in just a second, but mostly where I found the differential was that I could sit there with the individual clients and go through with them. Here's what you expect to have. Here's chronic stuff you have going on, blah, blah, blah. And I had done a personal research project because I couldn't find this data available on actual cash pay prices when I was doing this. And this is, several years ago. And so I had gone into the Tucson market and done my own research. And so I was able to pull up, oh, well, for this, it would be this at this hospital, and for this, it'd be this at this pharmacy, and blah, 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 and could walk the individual through. But basically on the group side, the HR people were like, we can't get into that unless you've got some really good vetted up to, kept up to date, marketing piece, basically, that we could use to help explain to this. Otherwise, it frightens people if we really push towards it. We can make it an option. We can provide them some, contribution to it, etc. But we can't hard push in that direction because most people don't understand the math that you're explaining. And so one of the things, again, that was hardest for me, and the only reason I was able to do it was because I did a personal research project in Tucson, was that I had those cash prices, which most people didn't have. And so what I'm wondering is, do you have a resource? Do you know anybody who's trying to keep resources on those cash pay prices so that people actually can have sort of a, even possibly an online HSA calculator where you put stuff in and it pulls current prices for the types of stuff that you expect to have or did in the prior year, and it can pull some current prices, estimates, etc., and figure out whether that's going to be a cost savings for you or not? No.
Well, the most successful transitions have been firms that increase the deductible and put money into an account that's almost equal to the increase. So then the employee says, okay, I got a higher deductible, but you're putting money into account, so if I needed it, it's there. The least successful transitions is when you have a high deductible and you don't put any money in the account. So I think that's a very key thing, and this is going to differ from employer to employer, but any employer that has first dollar coverage, I guarantee you, if you go from $0 to $2,000 deductible, you're going to save more than $2,000. So any employer that has a first dollar coverage, the very first health savings account was United Mine Workers, and this happened back in the early 1990s. It wasn't called a health savings account, but that's what it was. And the employer said to the mine workers, if you'll take $1,000 deductible, we'll write you a check for $1,000. And the mine workers said, fine, we'll take it. So anybody who has first dollar coverage can continue to do that today. You can probably go all the way up to $2,000 and save at least $2,000. And then you typically get no argument at all, because employees know they can save money if they're managing the money.
Similarly, the employee tends to save the money when they have to spend it out of their own pocket for a change. So it's definitely a nice mechanism. What else? We have some minutes left here in our call today.
Jeff, Charlie here, and folks, right below your mute button on your screen is a hand raise option. So if you want to push that to raise your hand, Jeff will see that and call on you if you don't want to blurt out your question, which some folks don't want to. But John, you're not just Mr. HSA and Health Reform, you've also have diversified in the taxes, and you were very vocal with the Trump tax plan, and you have a really high quality partner in Lawrence Kotlikoff. Are you in transition with taxes, or are you really pushing it right now, or what are your thoughts on taxes?
Well, Lawrence Kotlikoff has really the only international model that can explain international capital flows and how they respond to tax changes. And right before Christmas, the CBO invited model builders for about 6 or 7 different models in the United States to come to DC. And of those models, only the Kotlikov model has capital crossing borders. All the other models are closed models. And the CBO's model itself is a closed model, which means that the CBO assumes that when you cut corporate taxes, we don't get any more capital coming from abroad. Well, that was the whole purpose of corporate tax reform. So we've got models that are out of sync with what we're really trying to do. So Kotlikov, I spent 3 years. I raised $1 million to help him with this model, and but the administration did a poor job of selling it. Almost no resources went into selling tax reform to the financial writers. They still don't understand what happened or why it happened. New York Times is bad. They're all bad. And so we did a poor job of marketing tax reform. So we get to the election, and the Democrats mention taxes more than the Republicans. So that's how bad it was. We are going to, in the next week or so, have new data that's done by Larry Kotlikov and the Atlanta Fed. The Atlanta Fed is probably the most respected of the Federal Reserve banks in terms of data analysis and data accumulation. They have data nobody else has. And we're going to be able to talk about, on a state basis, how much the average household gains lifetime from tax reform. And it's going to be very large in every state. And we're going to try to get this out and get better news coverage, because if we don't change public perception of tax reform, in 2 years we could see it all undone.
Yeah, that's always the concern. A great medical question came in here. In your prior discussion with Taylor, here's a kind of response to that. It said you aren't paying cash prices, but the carrier's negotiated prices. Sometimes I've used Healthcare Blue Book, but you can also use a carrier's own comparison tool. And also that there's a plan. It says the group plans that I write for are coupled with a level funded group plan. Just talk to an STLD carrier, which is considering an HSA option for those plans.
Well, yeah, and I don't know much about those tools, but I know they're coming on the market and they're being made available. So this helps people become better consumers.
I was getting a little feedback there. I just was trying to bring Beverly on, but Beverly, I think you got your speakers on in addition to a headset and whatever. So we're getting a little loop feedback right there. She was the one asking those questions. What was it that you said? Repeat that a little bit.
Well, I haven't tried to stay up on top of all those tools. I know they're coming on the market, and it's helpful for the buyer to have a tool that you can go online and see what prices are for different services. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
I know we'll see a lot more of that. I've seen that rise of that too. And so as technology becomes more available, that'll be great. Let me see if I can unmute her for a minute there. Beverly? I think we lost the connection. I think maybe she's trying to redial in. Okay, well, we have time to see if she rejoins the group here. Anyone else have another question? We got time for really two more. One for now. And one.
Yeah, I had a question.
Please.
Yeah. John, I wondered if you got a minute or two, if you could say a little bit more about, you haven't said much about the health status insurance. That seems like a key part of this program. Have you any idea how much these, how expensive these are going to be? That seems to me like health status insurance ought to be about as equally as expensive as the basic policy. So you'd be paying about, since considering that about half of total healthcare costs are accounted for by individuals that have a high cost, $40,000 or more. So is these health status insurance going to make up about half the package if you buy a package that has ordinary coverage plus health status insurance, or am I doing my calculations wrong?
Well, if we're thinking about that, there are two kinds of health status insurance. The kind I talked about was putting a bridge to put together these 3-year packages, and no, that would not cost anywhere close to what the premium would be for the original package. And the reason is that people come in and out of the individual market all the time, and you always have the risk that that you have a really sick person, but the cost of insuring that risk is much smaller than the 3-year risk for the group as a whole. And the other way which I want to use health status insurance is I think it should be used as a basis for transferring people from plan to plan in the individual market itself, in the Obamacare exchange. And the reason why we have a race to the bottom is because insurers don't know what their compensation is going to be if they get a high cost patient. And so nobody wants the high cost patient. And by race to the bottom, I mean in Dallas, Texas, if you're even the Blue Cross plans will not cover UT Southwestern, which is probably the best research medical facility in the whole world. Won't cover Children's Medical Center, which is right next door. If you have cancer, you can't go to MD Anderson down in Houston. So all over the country, the plans that are surviving are Medicaid contractor plans, and the best facilities will not deal with them, will not accept their enrollees. And so you're really getting Medicaid. That's what you're buying in most places right now. You're buying we call it private insurance, but what it really is what Medicaid contractors are managing.
Interesting. Beverly, I'm trying to see if I can get you back in here.
I'm on my computer, guys. I don't know if you can hear me.
We can.
I have a very bad head cold, so I don't sound like myself. Hi, John. I think I got it on that airplane ride back from Dallas. We were at that health policy summit.
Yes, I can barely understand you. But how are you doing?
Okay. I'm better. I'm better. So, getting over that head cold.
Is that sufficient on your questions here, Beverly, or did you want some other clarification?
No, I just wanted to mention that John knows I am a health insurance agent and I write HSA plans and help to pioneer those. And for both groups and individuals. And, John is right on with more people need to understand them and employers need to understand them. But I have lately been coupling them with level funded plans. And those level funded plans are like self-funding only for very small groups down to 5 employees in most cases, where they can ask the health questions. So small healthy groups are getting really good rates these days.
So innovation continues in spite of the government's attempts to keep it squashed. So that's good to hear. Yeah, and hopefully you do feel better. You do sound pretty bad at the moment.
Thank you.
Right, we have time for literally one more question, and we've hit our hours slot here, and I appreciate the time has flown by. Does anyone have any good parting shot there?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kishore here again, and I have a question about pre-existing conditions. Now, with association plans, you have group plans available to almost anyone, right? Even a self-employed person could buy them. And if you have group insurance, what's the problem really about pre-existing conditions? You'd be covered anyway, right?
Well, employers and group plans have to cover pre-existing conditions, but if the association, I believe the association health plans fall under the regulations that cover self-insured plans, and self-insured plans have options that other plans don't have. In other words, if you're a commercial insurer, there's a long list of things you have to cover. But if you're a self-insured plan, you don't have to follow the long list. You have to meet an actuarial value test, but you can leave things out of your plan that other employers don't. And I know that's you probably want more detailed information, but you're going to have to get that someplace else. But I hope that's clarified.
Yes, it does.
This helps make the idea of what that distinction is. That was great. All right, well, we've just hit the end of our time slot. So, John, I want to thank you so much. We're going to release this information here so people can come back and listen to this again, and we'll make some attachments so you'll have some collateral to look at. And then Charles, if you want to remind everybody for next week, we've got Byron Schlomack coming.
That's right, Jeff, from the 1889 Institute. And when he was at Goldwater, he's the author of a pretty major reform that has made it into a couple bills in a couple states to privatize licensing, essentially. Rather, if you are certified from some registered organization, you can escape licensing. So a lot of politicians that are free market oriented are pushing variations of that in bills in various states. It's a big uphill battle, but it really has so much upside. And then we'll have other scholars in future weeks. So thanks very much, Jeff and John.
Yes, thank you. And thanks everyone for attending today, and look for a notice coming out in the next 24 hours.